I thought the idea of someone murdering Ben would have been impossible.
She'd hug you, shake your hand, be your best friend, and apparently literally stab you in the back.
Pardon the pun, he was living with a snake.
My name is Ben Renick. This is how we set up a grow-up.
We're talking about a snake breeder that people across the country cared about. It's not a place that people get killed.
He was on his belly, and I flipped him over. His skull was crushed.
He always put his family first. He was a good dad, he was a good husband, he always took care of her.
The reptile community lost a hero.
This girl, very tame, one of my favorite reasons. Here we have a normal sunset right here.
My brother bred large, rare snakes for a living. And he was very articulate when it comes to genetics, and he helped design several different species.
In this video, we are going to show you how we ship all of our reptiles. We're just going to take the snake and just put it in the bag.
We're talking hundreds of snakes that sometimes can sell for thousands of dollars.
And this is a holdback deal that we have.
Ben was a kid that came in, super nice guy, fresh young face, came into the industry and literally blew up overnight, it felt like. It just, like, everybody was kind of a whirlwind guy. He came in fast. Everybody knew who he was.
And we use all animal plastic cages. We're not putting this up.
He was like the Johnny Depp of Python. Like, he really was. Like, he could do no wrong. The guy was amazing.
There are two things that Ben was very passionate about. His family first, reptiles second.
I don't understand reptiles the way he did. I don't see the draw. But it's just me. A lot of people love it, you know. It's just not my thing. It never was. And while Ben seemed to love what he did, I didn't want to touch those things.
I think what happens is when you're born, right? Everybody in your family, snakes are a bad thing, and it's sort of ingrained in you. Once you work with them, once you handle and you get around them, you realize that they're completely harmless, and they're fascinating, and especially the genetics of the ball pythons, which is what Ben was working with.
They'll want reptiles and snakes to have certain designs, to come in certain colors, right? Like, I want an orange python. I want a pink and purple one. Or can I get a diamond pattern on the back of it? Now, this is all, sounds very designer, right? Very bougie of like, oh, let me get one of those and this color and this. But it is essentially a game of genetics.
The reptile community is a very tight-knit community. It's a sorority and it's a fraternity that if you are into reptiles, if you have the passion that Ben and I, have about these snakes and other reptiles, you are in this community. Ben was one of those people very early on, you could just tell, kind of emoted this passion for these reptiles that you could tell within 2 minutes of talking to him.
I started keeping snakes when I was about 7 years old. Welcome to the basement of Renick Reptiles. We don't, have massive amount of employees or anything like that. Like, my wife and I mainly run this company. We thoroughly just enjoy snakes.
You'd see Ben at all the shows, and just a super nice kid, just super, always happy, smile on his face, just a very humble, nice guy.
Stop on over and stop over and say hi to Ben and take a look at some of his awesome animals.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Ben.
Ben Renick was raising his snakes in this small town about an hour east of Columbia, Missouri. The name of the town, New Florence.
New Florence is a very small town. Very rural. It's what you'd find a lot out in mid-Missouri. People live on huge parcels of land because they farm it.
Ben Renick was raised on the family farm. It's a 72-acre piece of property. He did go away when he was in his early 20s, but eventually came back and lived on his family's property.
They lived on a pretty secluded piece of property there in Montgomery County.
So you have this world-famous snake breeder living in this small town, and he's really a reserved guy. He doesn't talk much unless he's talking about his snakes.
I used to say Ben was not much fun, but that's probably not true. Our kinds of fun were probably different. I was a little more rowdy than Ben was, I think.
He was very reserved. He didn't drink. He didn't do drugs. His parents were alcoholics. He'd seen enough of it.
The story of the Renicks in Montgomery County is certainly strange.
My family's been in the pet food business for generations.
Ben Renick's father, Frank Renick, started a pet food business. And so this was a family business named Spectrum. So as a result of this pet food company, they were a wealthy family. This business did bring in a lot of money. Everyone knew they were very financially comfortable.
They were well off. There's no question about that. They were eccentric. If they had one thing, they had three things. They always made sure the boys had everything they ever wanted.
You have the Renick family, this well-off family living on this massive piece of land. Then in the early 1990s, there's this huge explosion.
The farm blew up at one point. There was actually a home explosion. The Rennick's homes exploded. It sort of adds just another strange element to this family history.
It was a gas explosion that destroyed the family home, and the report said there was insulation falling down out of the sky hours after the explosion.
Years after the explosion, there was more trouble, so this explosion may have just been the beginning of the end. In 2012, Ben Renick's father, Frank, is arrested on fraud charges.
The allegation was that over the years, he was getting hundreds of people to invest millions of dollars in his pet food company, Spectrum Pet Food. And he was using that money to use for his personal expenses or to pay off other investors, basically a pyramid scheme. And at the end of the day, people lost millions of dollars.
Frank Renick was facing a federal indictment on financial-related charges. And Frank killed himself once those charges had been unsealed against him.
He was facing up to 20 years in prison, and 62-year-old Frank Renick is found on Father's Day with a gunshot to his torso. Now, police ruled it a suicide, and during this time is when Ben starts dating Lynlee Gallatin. Now, they're both in their early 20s, and by all accounts, it's a whirlwind romance.
He was absolutely head over heels in love with her.
They shared a lot of interest in music and film and things like that, and I know they had a lot of fun together. Lynlee just kind of showed up out of nowhere after his relationship ended with a previous girlfriend.
There really seems to be an instant connection between Lynlee and Ben, but it's not just about Lynlee coming into Ben's life. She also has a son who he accepts as his own.
And he just scooped Matthew right up. You know, Matthew was Lynlee's little boy, and he took to Matthew like he was his own. And then we find out that they're expecting.
The romance between Ben and Lynlee continued. They eventually had a daughter together, a little girl by the name of Emma. And then in 2014, when Emma was 2, they got married. Meanwhile, Ben's snake business continues to grow, and right by his side is Lynlee.
They were great. They were just a clean-cut, fresh, young couple that were on a great trajectory in an industry that they were doing very, very well at.
So here Ben is going to show you essentially what we do from the moment that they hatch out of the eggs.
They came as what looked like a happy couple who talked about their children and their married life together.
We put labels on every clutch that goes into the incubator with the parents, the lay date, the date that they're due to hatch.
These guys are feisty.
Ben, Lynlee, and the kids had a really peaceful life. They lived on this property and really just an idyllic life from all accounts.
Things seem to be going very well for the family. Everyone's involved in Ben's snake business, which is taking off. I mean, even the kids are involved. And they're not just breeding snakes, they're making cash.
But all of that is about to change. That fantastic life is about to change.
Ben and Lynlee Renick are living the American dream. They're married, they've got kids, they've got this great snake breeding business which is doing really well, and you've got this sprawling 72 acres that they're living on.
Ben's brother Sam also lived on the same property with his wife and kids.
It was nice, you know. Ben was very busy. I was very busy, and we were always working. Ben was always working. But on the weekends, we had a lot of time to see each other. The kids had time to see each other, and it was nice. I promised my mother in her dying breath that I was going to take care of the land and the property and save it for our children. And that's what I was trying to do.
Before she met Ben, Lynlee was a massage therapist, and she always wanted to open up a spa. So while the snake breeding business is doing so well, generating so much income, they decide to open a spa as well.
Getting her nails done. Who's helping you? What can I get your name?
Hi, I'm Lynlee. I'm the owner here.
Essentia Spa was located in West Columbia. It's a little business district out off of Scott Boulevard in West Columbia.
He was able to fund that. I can remember going up there on her grand opening, and you know, she's so excited about it.
Throughout the process of getting the spa up and running, Ben and Lynlee still have the snake breeding business, and that continues to grow. And during this entire process, Lynlee is right there by Ben's side.
Helping with shows, helping with legal advocacy at the state level. I know both of them were very involved in talking to the state legislature on laws regarding sort of animal trading, exotic animal ownership.
It all had to start when she got her spa. That had to have been the beginning of the end.
Then on June 8th, 2017, everything changes. Ben Renick is found dead on the floor of his warehouse where he keeps all these snakes. Incredible tragedy.
At about 6:30 p.m., Lynlee calls 911 and says that she has found her husband, Ben Renick, dead.
According to the Highway Patrol, she also calls Sam Renick.
When I got to the snake facility, the kids were outside. And the first thing that anyone said to me is Matthew asked if his daddy was dead. Lynlee was hysterical. She was running around in circles outside the facility, and well, she wasn't making sense. She was not. I couldn't get a full sentence out of her.
She was a mess. She was a wreck, and she was being taken care of by her best friend and her family, you know, which was good. You know, we were happy that somebody was there for her.
I couldn't find Ben, and then Lynlee took me back in and directed me to where the body was. He was on his belly, and I flipped him over. His skull was crushed. I thought it was a snake, and I came out of there covered in blood, but the kids were right there. And I had to take Matthew and Emma by hand to the main residence where my children were, and that was hard.
The police arrive, and they're looking for a large snake that they thought got out. They have a shotgun out looking for this snake.
And all we could think of is the snake escaped the cage, and he had constrictors. He had anacondas. They were 15, 20 feet long. They were big snakes. And so we thought maybe one of them, that was the only way, because Sam had said his head was crushed.
No, it was several hours later that the medical examiner had walked outside to catch a breath of air, and I had gone up to him and I asked him what happened, and he let me know that it was in fact not a snake, but he was a victim of a gunshot wound, multiple gunshot wounds.
Ben Renick wasn't shot just once. There were 8 bullets that went into his body.
And one of them, a contact wound.
Ben was found with a contact gun wound to his head. That means the muzzle was literally against the head when he was shot.
I couldn't believe that. I couldn't wrap my mind around that. I was in a state of disbelief and shock.
Maybe it was a break-in. Maybe somebody trolling around rural properties, trying to maybe steal farm equipment, and something escalates beyond what it was supposed to be.
Everything is reeling through our minds like, okay, somebody was there for the snakes, or they were looking for drugs, or they were looking for money, and they surprised Ben surprised them. It had to be something like that.
The first question that we asked was, how many snakes were missing? Because your first thought is, he was murdered because somebody came to steal his snakes.
For investigators, their first thoughts are to look at the people who were closest to Ben Renick and whoever was there when his body was discovered. So that's Lynlee and his brother Sam.
I was immediately forthcoming with everything. With the police, I gave them the shirt off my back, literally. Took a polygraph. I did every single thing I could possibly do. I gave them full access to my Facebook and everything else, all my electronic records, everything.
They're always going to be the first suspects. They were there. They're the ones that found them.
At first, the family was wondering whether or not this murder was somehow connected to Frank's past, his legal troubles. Was this some sort of revenge killing?
Because of Frank's past and concern about any of the investors still holding a real grudge or a threat. They'd never come after the boys before, so why would they now?
When it hit, it was kind of devastating for everybody. Just a simple, nice guy, and when he's taken like that, and anybody that's taken in that manner, it was terrible.
The news of Ben's death absolutely rocked the snake breeding community. Here's this up-and-coming breeder, and then all of a sudden, he's gone.
Today, our hobby lost a titan. You feel bad for his family and for him, and the hobby really lost somebody who cared about the animals.
His death is, I mean, it came as a shock to anybody in the ball python community, obviously, but I just felt like I needed to say rest in peace to him. He was a really good guy.
And it was devastating to everybody that somebody so nice and so young and such a upward trajectory in the industry was all of a sudden just gone.
Ben was a leader in the reptile community. And so on that day, the reptile community lost a hero.
The outpour of support and love after Ben's murder was unbelievable. So many people that respected what he did and he'd worked with throughout the years, that they started pouring in to help in any way they can. And it was beautiful. It was very special. And I think it would have meant the world to Ben.
Then there was the funeral, which was very difficult for everybody, but especially for Ben's stepson, Matthew.
Matthew is screaming. Why, Mom? Why? You know, just before they left off the balloons and stuff, and she was trying to console him, and you know, Emma is just standing there. She's little, she doesn't understand. But Matthew, he was so upset and so just distraught.
In the eyes of the police, Lynlee was suspect number one from day one. To the family, she was just a devastated wife. People who knew the couple didn't suspect her as the murderer. No way, no how.
Never, ever, Lynlee. She was, you know, the grieving widow.
The question now is, who killed Ben Renick? And at least at the beginning, nobody in the family suspected that there was any way it could have been Lynlee.
"29-year-old Ben Renick was found shot and killed on June 8th, 2017, on his own snake farm. Now, this is a murder that touched so many people. Obviously, his family impacted, but also the entire snake breeding community around the world.
2.5 years would go by, and still nobody arrested for Ben's murder, meaning no answers for Ben's family and no answers for the members of the snake breeding community. It was incredibly frustrating.
I called the Highway Patrol every week and then every other week, and I was the only one checking in on this for quite some time.
Why aren't they finding somebody? I was always calling Sam, too. Sam, have you heard anything new? Anything going on? Lynlee, you know, I'd ask her.
It was extremely frustrating for those couple of years when we didn't have answers. People would talk about it at expos.
There was no answers. Maybe somebody knew how much the animals were worth, so maybe somebody wanted the animals, wanted some money out of that. That's what we all kind of thought it was a robbery gone wrong for forever.
This is crazy. No suspect, no one's under arrest, but police did have their eye on someone, and the family would soon find out who that person was.
The police did clue in the family of Ben that the suspect is Lynlee, his wife. But the reality is nobody could believe it. This family could not believe that she would be behind shooting her husband to death.
We heard that she was a suspect. Well, isn't the spouse always the first suspect? But we still just, can't be. There was no reason to believe that it would have been her. Nothing.
Apparently in October of 2017, Lynlee went through a polygraph exam with law enforcement. According to her defense attorney, she failed the polygraph exam.
Ben's family was not aware at that time that Lynlee had failed a polygraph. In fact, they didn't find that out until years later.
While the family still couldn't believe that Lynlee would be involved in this murder, looking back in hindsight, there were some things that didn't make a lot of sense.
Lynlee's actions just don't sit well with the Renick family. They can't believe she's the killer, but they're confused by her.
I never could understand why she distanced herself from us. We just assumed that it was her way of moving forward, so we just respected that. Another thing that was odd is she never felt unsafe. She never felt like there could be a threat out there. We brushed it off because how does a grieving widow act? I don't know.
She wouldn't let me see my brother's remains. They wouldn't even let me into the funeral service. They had to wait for her to get there because Ben's remains were in there. She didn't want me near them. I thought it was all it was strange.
About 6 months after Ben dies, Lynlee decides to go public on social media and announce that she's now in a new relationship.
Almost immediately after all this, she jumps into another relationship and has a child with one of her lovers. And I think that was when we really realized something was wrong. Not to mention her decision to sell the property while I was on it, I mean, that's another big red flag.
Lynlee asked the Renicks to leave the property. That property did sell for a considerable amount, nearly $800,000. So for all of the years that folks lived there and the Renicks built their lives, now sort of whisked away, belonged to somebody else.
Everybody speculated it was this person, that person, and like, it didn't make sense. Things that don't make sense are usually really off. And then apparently she was cheating on him.
When it came out that Lynlee was cheating on Ben, people could not believe it.
After Ben died, details started to trickle out about a double life being led, and that there were multiple affairs by Ben's own wife.
I didn't know that the marriage was in any kind of jeopardy, and I certainly couldn't have in my wildest dreams imagined that she would be having an affair, not to mention multiple affairs. That would have been unthinkable at the time.
His wife was his queen. They were great together. He loved her unconditionally, and as far as I saw from the outside, it was beautiful. Like a couple of weeks before he passed away, he posted how much he was excited to be with her.
It's unclear how much, if anything, Ben knew about Lynlee's alleged affairs, and you can look to a post that he made on social media as evidence of that. It says, "There's not a day that goes by I don't appreciate everything this lady does." To write that on social media, he had to have been in love.
Ben did not know. If Ben had known, it would have been, I don't think Ben would have stayed in the marriage if he'd known.
It's been nearly 3 years, and police know that Lynlee Renick has had multiple affairs and she's failed her polygraph exam, but they still don't have enough evidence to make an arrest.
Police need a break in the case. Without a break, some sort of help, this case is going nowhere. And then a break comes and falls right into the laps of investigators.
In the mid-2000s, Ben Renick, a very wealthy snake breeder from Missouri, marries after dating Lynlee Gallatin. She is a massage therapist, and they share the same interests, the same music, going to movies. They move in together very fast and start a family fast. By all accounts, they were a very happy family.
In June of 2017, Ben is murdered at his snake farm, but no one is arrested. 2.5 years go by with no answers. Investigators need a big break.
What people want to see in this case is that Ben gets justice. So the break finally came in January of 2020.
On January 16, 2020, Ben's wife, Lynlee, and her ex-boyfriend, Michael Humphrey, were arrested and charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action.
Lynlee and Michael were exes. That was the only known connection that we had between these two people.
And Sam called me, and he said, they're arresting them now. I was just like, how?
The big question on all of our minds at the time when we heard was, what was the break? How is it after we're coming up on 3 years of this murder happening, of this killing, what was it?
What it was one of Lynlee's exes coming forward and telling investigators everything they needed to take Lynlee and Michael Humphrey into custody.
A different one of Lynlee's partners, someone at the time we only knew as BB, that gave an interview with the Highway Patrol saying that Lynlee had confessed to him almost all of the details that we know of what the Highway Patrol says happened.
This is the other ex, Brandon Blackwell, who was actually in a relationship with Lynlee when Ben was murdered. And that relationship continued afterwards.
During this time, after Ben's death, they also have a child together. But in the fall of 2019, Brandon and Lynlee's relationship begins to fall apart. It becomes apparently very, very contentious.
When Brandon and Lynlee break up, it is bad. It is bitter. They have a child together. There are custody issues. At one point, Lynlee takes out a restraining order against Brandon, and at that point, Brandon decides to go to investigators and tell them what he claims he knows about Ben Renick's death.
According to Brandon Blackwell, Lynlee recruited an old boyfriend, Michael Humphrey, to shoot Ben. He agrees to do it allegedly on the day in question.
They drive out to the snake farm, and while they're driving out there, Ben is taking out some garbage, and Lynlee introduces Michael as an old friend who just wants to see some snakes.
They go back into the snake building. Ben is cleaning off a back wall. Investigators say, according to Brandon, that Michael and Lynlee have now decided that it's going to be Lynlee that pulls the trigger.
So it's Lynlee that goes forward and does it. Lynlee's the one that decides, I'll be the one to shoot him, and it's Lynlee that shoots him.
According to prosecutors, the motive in this case was money and the fact that Lynlee believed that Ben was going to leave her because the spa business had become a financial disaster. In fact, according to a probable cause statement, she was, quote, sucking the money out of the business.
Lynlee had been hit with a lawsuit from Capital One over about $2,000 in credit card debt. Essentia itself had been hit with 2 lawsuits from contractors that said that she had not been paying bills on work that they had done at the spa. All told, she had about $8,000 in outstanding bills from these contractors.
For the snake community and the family, this news is really hard to take. They had raised money and given tens of thousands of dollars to Lynlee and the kids. And now she might be the one responsible?
And we raised a bunch of money for his wife, who was obviously, as everyone thought, the survivor of the parents, and they have kids, and we wanted to help.
We literally talked on the phone about a week and a half after this happened, and she was like you would expect. It wasn't cold, it wasn't anything. It was literally what you would expect from a wife losing her husband.
When tragedy happens, we take care of our own. So that money did go to Lynlee.
If the devil was a person, I believe that was her.
Everyone rallied around the family and did everything they could to support, his grieving widow.
I talked to Lynlee. I've been face to face with Lynlee before. Like, she was always at the shows with Ben. I'd laughed with her, we'd cracked jokes at Ben's booth. It was astounding.
The betrayal, that is so strong. Because even knowing all the little pieces, it still doesn't make sense. How come we didn't see that?
From the moment she's arrested, Lynlee says she's innocent. The allegations are not true. But as time went by, more disturbing details would emerge.
Little by little, details of what allegedly happened to Ben are revealed to the public. There is more to Brandon Blackwell's story.
That Lynlee had confessed to him almost all of the details that we know of what the Highway Patrol says happened. That Lynlee and Michael went to the farm, that they essentially confronted Ben in the very barn that they found him dead.
It turned out that allegedly the shooting was not the first time that Lynlee tried to kill Ben.
Brandon claims that Lynlee at one point tried to poison Ben.
According to Brandon, Lynlee and one of her employees, Ashley Shaw, came up with this scheme to poison Ben by making a protein drink laced with Percocet.
It didn't work and really just made Ben very sick.
Ashley Shaw at first denies any involvement to the police, but soon changes her story and in exchange for immunity, sings like a canary.
Because of this immunity deal, Ashley Shaw is off scot-free, and she ends up telling investigators not only was she part of the poisoning scheme, but she was also helping Lynlee plan the shooting of Ben Renick. So now with Ashley Shaw also confessing, you're not only relying on the word of Brandon Blackwell, it makes the case stronger, much stronger.
Brandon's story, Ashley's story, Michael's story. There's too many corroborating stories. You know, it's just not her word against theirs anymore.
In every case, a jury certainly wants to know what's the motive. Now, that's not an element of the crime, but the prosecution in this case is going to say the motive, money. Why? Because Ben had a $1 million life insurance policy to benefit Lynlee.
I'm sure at the point of that, she's assuming that she's getting away with it, plus getting paid, but I would assume it's just straight greed.
Lynlee was struggling financially to run her business and apparently taking money from the reptile business in order to keep it floated. And Lynlee feared that Ben was going to leave her, was going to end the marriage and take the children with him.
Ben was in a position, a very unique position at the time of his death, where he had a lot of assets, significantly more than he had previously. With me putting the farm into his hands, he was in a position where he owned the entire property, which was taken advantage of when he was murdered. Ben would have gotten divorced and probably gotten the kids and probably not left her with much of anything. And I think she was very aware of that.
Brandon Blackwell told the police that Lynlee justified what she did because, as she said, Ben had the financial means to take her children away from her.
What I also know about Ben at the time of his death is that he was trying to get out of the business. He was trying to sort of sell off his assets. And he had struck a deal with a gentleman named Robin Liner. Robin Liner is a professional hockey player.
He was going to probably sell that part of his business, but retain enough to build something new. He was going to basically cash out on all of his hard work.
The sale price on that was $1.2 million. Ben was about to become a millionaire. He had a structured sale with Robin that he would collect $200,000 quarterly throughout the year 2017 into early 2018, and in fact had collected the first of those installments in February of 2017.
The sale is put on hold when Ben dies. Eventually, the courts would have to intercede to figure out who gets the money and who gets the snakes.
Both sides went back and forth on this. A very contentious lawsuit by the looks of it. In fact, apparently at one point, people for Robin Liner's team had tried to actually go to the farm and just start taking snakes from it. They even asked the court that, look, you need to give us these snakes now because from what we know, the snakes are beginning to breed in different bins. They're beginning to get around.
The business was sold, was put into a trust, and that trust is being controlled for the children. I don't think she would have access to that in any way.
Prosecutors claim that 24 hours after Ben Renick's death, Lynlee is on the phone with the insurance company looking for details about a payout.
Well, the life insurance she wasn't able to touch because she was the main suspect in his murder, and that was moved past her to the children.
This is a deceptively simple-sounding case, right? The oldest one in the book. Wife kills husband for money. The evidence against Lynlee and her ex it's sort of muddled and complicated. Both sides will have to weed through all of it, this he said, she said, and get the jury to hear their narrative of the case and how it went down. Question is, what will those narratives look like?
In September of 2020, both Lynlee Renick and Michael Humphrey are in jail, facing charges of first-degree murder. Lynlee's attorney then decides to throw a Hail Mary, asking for a bond hearing and asking the judge, even though she's facing first-degree murder charges, to let her out on a simple signature bond.
Mr. Blackwell and Miss Renick share a child together. They started an affair 2 days before she murdered her husband. During the relationship, she confessed to how she murdered her husband.
And Your Honor, before we go any further with this hearing, as there are cameras present, I'd ask that you refrain from any more comments about her being a murderer or failing polygraph examinations. Let's wait till the evidence comes out.
Judge, I thought you...
Just say alleged.
It took 2 bond hearings for the judge to make his decision.
We are asking, Your Honor, today, like I stated in my motion, for Lynlee Renick to be released on her own personal recognizance with electronic monitoring. She has no criminal history.
Now, if you're charged with first-degree murder, you're basically not getting out on bond, period.
I was sick to my stomach listening to that. I was scared.
And we're asking the court to look at her as a human being. She's somebody's sister. She's somebody's daughter. She has 3 children.
Why not let her get out? COVID. She's got 3 children. She's got medical problems. I was like, he's gonna get her out of jail.
During this hearing, something happened that you never want to happen as a lawyer. She decided to speak on her own behalf as the defendant.
Your Honor, I have a
And then, hang on just a second. All right, did somebody else say
My client was going to say something.
Okay, Ms. Renick, did you want to say something? Do you want her to say something?
That's fine, Your Honor.
I don't know if it makes a difference, but my home confinement would be at my dad's, and that is in Boone County. They're in Columbia. So I know you had mentioned that they had a service through the court that you would use. I don't know if that has any bearing on it, that I wouldn't be in Montgomery County on home confinement. I would be at my dad's in Columbia.
We understand that, Lynlee. I'm gonna talk to you about trying to pay for it. Okay, that's the issue right now.
It's incredibly rare to see somebody released on bond, let alone a release on their own recognizance for first-degree murder. This is the most serious charge you can face in the state of Missouri.
You gotta be kidding me. In the middle of this hearing, while the prosecutor's making the argument, Lynlee decides to raise her hand and tell the judge, no, that's not correct.
Surprise to today because the insurance company also has concerns about her causing the death of her husband.
That is incorrect.
You don't want her saying anything, do you?
One of the arguments from the defense is that, hey, Ashley Shaw may have had something to do with this murder. She's out. Brandon Blackwell, he's out. He's facing some charges. Lynlee should be out too.
The judge heard how the state had treated these other 2 witnesses, namely Brandon Blackwell and Ashley Shaw, and thought, well, if they're all getting bond, I don't see why I can't give her bond as well. For first-degree murder, that don't happen a lot.
Lynlee is released on her own recognizance. That means that she doesn't have to pay anything. There's no money she has to put up. She gets to walk out of jail.
So prosecutors didn't have any physical evidence to back up Brandon Blackwell's and Ashley Shaw's story until late October when they dropped a bombshell.
Michael Humphrey, who claimed he didn't know that Lynlee was going to shoot Ben when they went to the snake farm that day, was found guilty of first-degree murder in October.
At this point, Michael Humphrey is convicted of first-degree murder, but if he cooperates, prosecutors are going to knock it down to second degree, in which case he'll be eligible for parole.
In a pretrial hearing, this is a hearing that nobody's really expecting anything significant to come out. The prosecutor stands up and announces to everybody that Michael Humphrey is going to testify against Lynlee and they have found the murder weapon.
The murder weapon in this case was never found.
Judge, and I'm sorry Ms. Westman is not aware of this because it just happened today, after meeting with Michael Humphreys and discussing his alleged involvement and Ms. Renick's alleged involvement and gaining his cooperation in this case, law enforcement, we believe, recovered the murder weapon. It's on its way to the crime lab as we speak, Judge. We've agreed that at the time of sentencing, we would work it out to where he would accept responsibility for his crimes and be sentenced not for first-degree murder, but for second-degree murder, and the punishment would still be life, except this time it would be parole.
Lynlee has maintained her innocence from the very beginning, and her attorney alleges that the state's case basically just revolves around what Brandon Blackwell is saying.
He, we allege, to get out of jail, told the police that Lynlee Renick, my client, 2.5 years prior to that, confessed to him to killing her husband. The police then go and they find Ashley Shaw. Their exact words, Your Honor, to Ashley Shaw are, you can be on Team Lynlee or Team Missouri, and the people on Team Lynlee are going to jail. They're going to jail for first-degree murder.
A big part of the defense's case is that Brandon Blackwell is not a very trustworthy source of information here, has all of these sort of things to gain by coming up with a story against Lynlee.
I have spoken with the prosecutors, and I'm aware of some of the evidence they have, and they have more than they need.
Lynlee is facing life in prison on this first-degree murder charge, alleging that she shot Ben Renick at close range in cold blood.
Now, we all want justice for Ben. At the end of the day, that's all we want, is justice for Ben.
I would love to see justice done, but ultimately, it's not really gonna help anything to bring Ben back.
Did she ever believe that she was ever going to get away with it? Did she think that life would just go on forever?
It's worse for the kids than anyone else. That's all I can think of, you know.
To lose your father in such a tragic way, it was traumatizing to those children. And then, after all this time, after all her crying and all her play acting, to find out that it was your mother that did this to you, that did this to your father.
The real victims in all of this, unfortunately, are the children. You know, they're gonna have to live with this for the rest of their lives.
I hope they can grow up and get past this, just like anybody that's in any kind of tragedy. I hope they can just get past this and have as normal life as you possibly can without your father and your mother.
Ben will never die because we all remember him here. We all talk about him. We all share pictures of him. He will always be remembered here. His legacy of his kindness, the amazing animals he bred.
This is a Renick's ghost, and I was fortunate enough to get a pair from an individual, a friend of mine, who he bought them from Ben's directly. This here is a legacy of Ben Renick.
I feel like part of the lasting legacy from this is going to be about Ben. It's going to be about how he made people feel. People care about his case so deeply because he made people feel very deeply about him and the business that he ran.
Ben Renick was a legacy. He was the bomb. Oh God. He was everything that you would want to be in a breeder. We all love him and miss him.
She built it all up to make it look like she was innocent, but she was putting everything into place to make it happen for her.
I hope she gets the needle. I hope she's either electrocuted, I don't care how she's put to death, just put her to death.